Hello again, I'm Ian Masters. This is the Daily Briefing at KPFK in Los Angeles, 90.7 FM and 98.7 in Santa Barbara. Let's now go to the subject of Dick Cheney, former Vice President, who's becoming more and more visible. Some people think he's speaking out because he's afraid he might go to jail. But he's certainly trying to second-guess the president, and he's formed his daughter and William Crystal, one of the neoconservative leaders, have formed a little lobbying group to agitate against the president. Let's now talk to somebody who wasn't a draft dodger like Dick Cheney, who got 5 deferments to get out of Vietnam, but somebody who actually served in Iraq. I'm speaking with Major General Paul Eaton, retired U.S. Army general, who was in command of operations to train Iraqi troops following George W. Bush's invasion of that country. General Eaton served in Iraq between 2003 and 2004 until he returned to the United States to become Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations and Training, the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command at Fort Monroe, Virginia. He is currently Senior Advisor to the National Security Network and has been speaking out in response to former Vice President Cheney's remarks. In particular, the Vice President referred to President Obama's dithering over Afghanistan. You have said in response, Dick Cheney and the Bush administration were incompetent war fighters. They ignored Afghanistan for 7 years with a crude approach to counterinsurgency warfare, best illustrated by 1, deny it, 2, ignore it, 3, bomb it. While our intelligence agency called the region the greatest threat to America, the Bush White House under-resourced our military efforts, shifted attention to Iraq, and failed to bring to justice the masterminds of September 11th. Fighting words, General.
Ian, for most of the retired military set out there, we are very frustrated when you have incompetent warfighters challenging men we believe are doing the right thing in a very prudent approach. So I finally was sufficiently antagonized that I had to speak out.
Well, not only you, the conservative columnist George Will said that he'd, in response to Cheney's remark about dithering, he said, I wished Cheney had dithered before going into Iraq.
I saw George Will on with, I think it was George Stephanopoulos' program yesterday morning. Terrific, and I was delighted to hear him speak in such tones.
Well, it seems, though, that the record hasn't really been in. I mean, one of the most extraordinary things about the Bush-Cheney era is the lack of accountability, and one wonders whether we as a society are going to suffer from this sense of the accountability-free zone. I mean, I don't know how you bring up children without making them accept some accountability. But if we can go back to pre-9/11, there's no accountability for missing the biggest attack since Pearl Harbor. And then the war itself, from my understanding, and you were there from 2003 to 2005, one of the things that happened there to kind of create the insurgency was that all of our intelligence assets were out chasing WMDs, kicking in doors, arresting people, putting them in Abu Ghraib, and can you make the case that, that we brought this thing on?
Ian, from the very beginning, when the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Rumsfeld at the time, denied the true complete military planning to address all 4 phases of this operation, he denied planning for the reconstruction phase. He failed to resource, hence the reconstruction phase, and had a number of assumptions in that plan for which he did not provide what we call branch plans to address a failed assumption. So the true and extraordinary incompetence of the Bush-Cheney-Rumsfeld defense architecture was borne out right at the very beginning in a failure to prudently and appropriately plan. And for them to come back and say and challenge President Obama for dithering when what we are witnessing is not just a man who is willing to address the possibility of changing his plan, but which is something that the military absolutely adores. The military adores a courageous leader. They really, really love a courageous, adaptive leader. So what we've got in this president and in this administration is a group of men and women who are willing to take a long, hard look at the problem and potentially say, well, we need to adapt a little bit here. We didn't get that for 8 years out of the Bush administration. Absolutely, they had this idea that they were going to force, regardless of the conditions out there, regardless of the changes, and we got what we have right now in Afghanistan, and we are still recovering in Iraq.
Well, I guess what I was trying to say, General Eaton, was that it seems as though they bought their own propaganda that led to the war, and we know that it in many cases was quite specious. It was kind of a faith-based notion, and that by going through that whole early stage of what appeared to be denial about the insurgency, I understand that you couldn't even use the word insurgency in briefings, and well, then by the time they figured it out, he sat on Bush and Cheney sat on the advice. First of all, I believe Saudi intelligence suggested a framework for the surge, and then the Brits did, and then finally General Petraeus and David Kilcullen put it on his desk, and even then it took 3 months.
You are absolutely correct, Ian. When the warfare changes, if you refuse to see the change, then you are not going to adapt to the change. And the Bush administration refused to come off message, refused to accept the fact that the war in Iraq had morphed into this insurgency. And at that point, you do different things. You have different kinds of units. You take different kinds of military operations. And at the end of the day, you ask yourself as a leader, did I create more insurgents than I took off the streets? And if the answer is yes, which is frequently the case when you do nothing but offensive and killing operations, then you might want to take a long, hard look at that plan. And we helped create, by refusal to understand we were in an insurgency, a bigger insurgency.